Are you ready to experience spine-chilling stories? Terrifying Horrors brings you haunted villages, eerie incidents, and mysterious forces waiting to test your courage. Each story takes you on a thrilling journey filled with fear and suspense. If you dare to face the unknown, subscribe now and step into the darkness. Terrifying Horror X, where terror awaits you. The Last Christmas Card. The snow fell heavily outside, blanketing the neighborhood in an eerie silence. The only sound was the faint chime of Christmas bells in the distance and the occasional whistle of the icy wind. The Patterson family had gathered around the fireplace in their cozy living room. The warm glow of the fire painted soft hues on the faces of Elizabeth, her husband Michael, and their teenage daughter Emma. It was a peaceful Christmas Eve, or so they thought. Michael leaned over to the coffee table, picking up the pile of mail that had arrived earlier in the day. It was mostly the usual: bills, junk flyers, and a few Christmas cards. "Looks like the Browns sent their annual family photo," Michael said, flipping through the stack. Elizabeth chuckled. "Let me guess, matching sweaters and a golden retriever?" "Exactly," he replied, holding up the card. "They even managed to make their dog look festive." Emma rolled her eyes. "Do people even send these anymore? Why not just post it online like everyone else?" Michael smirked and continued flipping through the mail until he paused, his fingers hovering over an envelope at the bottom of the pile. It was smaller than the others, with an old-fashioned design. The paper was yellowed with age and the edges were frayed, as if it had traveled a long way to reach them. There was no return address, only the words, "For the Patterson family." He frowned, showing the envelope to Elizabeth. "Did you order anything that might come in a vintage envelope?" Elizabeth shook her head. "Not that I recall." "Open it. Maybe it's one of those gimmicky holiday cards." Michael carefully tore the envelope open. Inside was a single Christmas card. The design was ornate, featuring a painting of a snow-covered village with an old church in the background. But it wasn't the artwork that caught their attention. It was the handwriting inside. "This is your final Christmas together. Cherish it." The words were written in elegant cursive, the ink smudged slightly as if written hastily. There was no signature, no indication of who had sent it. Just those ominous words. Elizabeth laughed nervously. "Okay, this has to be some kind of prank. Who sends something like that?" Michael's face darkened. "It's not funny. Who would do this? And why?" Emma grabbed the card from her dad and examined it closely. "It's probably just some weird marketing thing. You know, scare people into buying life insurance or something." But even as she spoke, a chill ran down her spine. There was something unsettling about the card, something she couldn't quite explain. "Let's just forget about it," Elizabeth said, taking the card and tossing it into the trash can by the fireplace. "It's probably just some joke. We're not going to let it ruin our night." They tried to brush it off, but the card's message lingered in the back of their minds. The clock struck midnight, and the house was quiet. The Christmas tree lights twinkled softly in the corner of the living room, casting long shadows on the walls. Michael and Elizabeth had gone to bed, but Emma was still awake, scrolling through her phone. She couldn't stop thinking about the card. Something about it felt wrong. She slipped out of bed and tiptoed downstairs, intending to retrieve it from the trash can. But when she reached the living room, she froze. The trash can was empty. "Mom must have thrown it out," she muttered to herself. But as she turned to go back upstairs, she noticed something on the coffee table. There, in the same yellowed envelope, was the Christmas card. Emma's heart raced. She was certain her mom had tossed it into the trash. So how was it back? Slowly, she reached out and picked up the card. The message inside had changed. "They don't believe, but you should. The clock is ticking." Emma gasped, dropping the card as if it had burned her fingers. She stumbled back, her eyes wide with terror. The room felt colder, the shadows deeper. "Dad!" she screamed. her voice trembling. "Mom, come here!" Moments later, Michael and Elizabeth rushed downstairs, their faces filled with concern. "What's wrong?" Michael asked. Emma pointed to the card on the coffee table. It wasn't there before. And the message, it changed." Elizabeth picked up the card and read the new message aloud. Her face paled. "I threw this away," she whispered. "I know I did." Michael frowned, snatching the card from her. "This has gone far enough. Someone's messing with us." "But how?" Emma cried. "We locked all the doors. No one could have gotten in." Michael didn't have an answer. He glanced at the windows and double-checked the locks. Everything was secure. Yet the card was undeniably there, and its message was undeniably sinister. Elizabeth took a deep breath. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Or a mistake." Emma shook her head. "You don't believe that. Look at the handwriting. It's ancient. Who would go through this much trouble for a prank?" Michael sighed, rubbing his temples. "We'll deal with it tomorrow. It's late and we're all tired. Let's get some sleep." Reluctantly, they agreed, but none of them could shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over the house. The night was far from peaceful. At precisely 3 a.m., the sound of faint humming filled the house. It was soft at first, like a distant choir singing a haunting melody. Then it grew louder, echoing through the halls. Michael and Elizabeth woke up to the sound, their hearts pounding. "Do you hear that?" Elizabeth whispered. Michael nodded, grabbing a flashlight from his bedside table. "Stay here. I'll check it out." He crept downstairs, the beam of the flashlight cutting through the darkness. The humming grew louder as he approached the living room. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, the sound stopped abruptly. The room was empty, save for the glowing Christmas tree. But as Michael turned to leave, his flashlight caught something on the wall. Scrawled in the same elegant handwriting as the card were the words, "You've been warned." Michael's blood ran cold. The eerie warning on the wall hung over Michael like a dark cloud. His pulse pounded in his ears as he stood frozen in the dimly lit living room. The words, "You've been warned," gleamed faintly, as though the ink itself was alive. He took a shaky step back, trying to convince himself it was some sort of elaborate prank, but deep down, he knew better. He bolted upstairs, his hands trembling as he burst into the bedroom. "Elizabeth," he said, barely able to keep his voice steady, "we have a serious problem." Elizabeth sat up, her face still pale from the earlier events. "What now?" Michael hesitated, unsure of how to put it into words. "There's writing on the wall in the living room. It's the same handwriting as the card." Elizabeth's hand flew to her mouth. "What? Are you sure?" "Positive," Michael replied. "And I didn't hear anyone come in or out. The doors and windows are locked." Before they could say more, Emma's scream echoed from her room. Michael and Elizabeth rushed down the hall to find Emma sitting upright in bed, her face pale and her breathing labored. Her hands clutched her blanket tightly, her wide eyes fixed on the far corner of the room. "There was something in here," she stammered, pointing to the shadows near her closet. Michael turned his flashlight toward the corner. It was empty. "What did you see?" Elizabeth asked, sitting beside her daughter and wrapping an arm around her. Emma swallowed hard. "It was like a figure, tall and thin, but it wasn't human. Its eyes were glowing red, and it just stood there watching me. When I screamed, it disappeared." Michael scanned the room carefully, his grip tightening on the flashlight. "No one's here now. Are you sure it wasn't just a nightmare?" Emma glared at him. "It wasn't a nightmare. I saw it." Elizabeth glanced at Michael. "This can't be a coincidence. First the card, then the writing, and now this." Michael nodded reluctantly. "We need to figure out what's going on, and fast." The family regrouped in the living room, unwilling to stay apart after Emma's encounter. Michael pointed out the writing on the wall, and Elizabeth's face grew even paler. "How did this happen?" she whispered. "I don't know," Michael admitted, "but it's clear someone or something is trying to scare us." As they stood there, the old grandfather clock in the corner began to chime. The deep, resonant tones echoed through the house, marking midnight. But something was off. The clock continued chiming, even after 12 strikes. 13, 14, 15. "That's not supposed to happen," Elizabeth said, her voice trembling. Michael walked over to the clock, his flashlight illuminating the ornate woodwork. The hands on the face weren't pointing to midnight anymore. They were spinning wildly, as if the clock had a mind of its own. Well, he reached out to stop the pendulum, but the moment he touched the clock, the chimes ceased abruptly, and the house was plunged into silence. Did it stop?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, the fireplace roared to life, flames erupting without any wood or kindling. The family jumped back as the flames grew higher, and within the fire they saw shapes forming. Images of people they didn't recognize. The faces in the fire seemed to scream silently, their mouths opening wide in expressions of agony. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the fire died out, leaving the room in darkness once more. Michael grabbed a poker from the fireplace, holding it defensively. "Whatever's happening, we're not sitting here and waiting for it to get worse. We need answers." Elizabeth nodded. "But where do we even start? We don't know who sent the card, and we don't know what it means." Emma hesitated, then spoke up. "What if there's more to the card? Maybe it's trying to tell us something." Reluctantly, they retrieved the card from the coffee table. Michael held it under the flashlight, studying it carefully. "Wait," Emma said, pointing to the back of the card. "There's something faint there." Michael turned the card over, and they saw faint writing etched into the paper, almost invisible unless held at the right angle. It read, "In the attic, beneath the boards. Time is slipping away." Elizabeth shuddered. "The attic? What could possibly be up there?" "I don't know," Michael said, "but we're about to find out." Armed with flashlights and a growing sense of dread, the family climbed the creaky stairs leading to the attic. The air grew colder with each step, and by the time they reached the top, their breath was visible in the frosty air. But the attic was a maze of old furniture, dusty boxes, and forgotten belongings. Michael led the way, shining his flashlight across the floor. "Beneath the boards," he muttered, scanning for anything that looked out of place. Emma pointed to a loose plank near the center of the attic. "There, that one looks different." Michael knelt down and pried the board loose, revealing a small, ornate box hidden underneath. It was made of dark wood, with intricate carvings that seemed to shift in the light. "What is that?" Elizabeth asked, her voice barely audible. Michael opened the box cautiously. Inside was an old photograph in a folded piece of parchment. The photograph showed a family of 4, a man, a woman, and 2 children, standing in front of a snow-covered house. But something about the photo was off. The family's faces were blurred, their features indistinct, as if the image was decaying. The parchment was even stranger. It contained a list of names, written in the same elegant handwriting as the card. At the bottom of the list, a single name was circled: Patterson family. Elizabeth's hands shook as she held the parchment. "Why is our name on this list? And who are these other people?" Michael studied the photograph again. "Wait a minute. This house in the photo, it looks like ours." Emma gasped. "What are you saying? That the people in this photo lived here before us?" Elizabeth nodded slowly. "It makes sense. But why would they leave this behind? And what does it have to do with us?" Before anyone could answer, the attic door slammed shut behind them, plunging them into darkness. "Who's there?" Michael shouted, gripping the box tightly. A low, guttural laugh echoed through the attic. "You were warned," a voice hissed. The flashlight beams flickered, and the temperature dropped even further. Shadows moved across the walls, taking on shapes that defied explanation. "You took what wasn't yours," the voice continued, growing louder. "Now you'll pay the price." Emma screamed as one of the shadows lunged toward her, but Michael swung the poker, dispersing it momentarily. "We need to get out of here," Elizabeth shouted. They scrambled down the attic stairs, slamming the door behind them. The house seemed to pulse with a life of its own, the walls groaning and the lights flickering wildly. Michael clutched the box tightly. Whatever's happening, it's tied to this. We need to destroy it. Elizabeth hesitated. But what if destroying it makes things worse? Before they could decide, the grandfather clock began chiming again, each strike reverberating through the house like a death knell. Michael looked at his family, determination in his eyes. Whatever's coming, we face it together. But as the clock struck its final chime, a deafening silence fell over the house. The shadows grew still, and the air felt heavy with anticipation. Then from the corner of the room, a figure emerged, a tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes and a sinister smile. "You've ignored my warnings," he said, his voice cold and menacing. "Now your time is up." The figure stepped closer, his tall, gaunt frame seeming to stretch unnaturally in the flickering light. The Patterson family huddled together, paralyzed by fear. His hollow eyes scanned them, his sinister smile deepening. "You've ignored the signs," the figure said in a low, gravelly voice. "Now you belong to me." Michael stepped forward, gripping the poker tightly. "Who are you? What do you want?" The figure tilted his head, as though amused by the question. "I am the collector," he said. "I gather those who ignore fate. You took the box, disturbed what was meant to remain hidden. Now you will pay the price." "Wait!" Elizabeth shouted, stepping forward. Her voice shook, but there was a hint of desperation in her tone. "We didn't mean to disturb anything. Please let us fix this." The collector regarded her with cold amusement. "Fix it? There is no fixing what has already begun. The curse is alive now. It hungers." Emma clutched her mother's arm. "What curse? Why us?" The collector's expression darkened. "This house carries a history of betrayal and blood. The family before you, just like you, ignored the warnings. They tampered with forces they didn't understand. The curse consumed them, as it will consume you." Michael tightened his grip on the poker. "We're not going to let that happen." The collector smiled again, his teeth sharp and unnervingly white. "There is a way," he said slowly. "A sacrifice." Elizabeth's breath hitched. "What do you mean?" The collector gestured toward Emma. "A life for a life. One of you must stay here, willingly, to bear the curse. The rest may leave." The room fell silent, the weight of the ultimatum crashing down on them. "No!" Michael shouted. "We're not making any deals with you." The collector's smile faded, replaced by a look of impatience. "Then you all die." Emma's voice trembled as she spoke. "There has to be another way. You said this curse started with the family before us. What if we can break it?" The collector laughed, a hollow, echoing sound. "You? Break the curse? Impossible." But Michael's mind was racing. He remembered the photograph and the list of names. The family before us, they were part of this, weren't they? They did something to bring this curse here. The collector's eyes glinted. They were the first to disturb the box, but the curse grows stronger with each new family. Their fate is sealed. Michael looked at Elizabeth and Emma. "We have to try. If the curse started with them, maybe we can end it there too." The family worked together, their fear momentarily overridden by determination. Michael examined the photograph again, focusing on the house in the background. "Look," he said, pointing to the snow-covered church in the distance. "That's not far from here. If the curse started with the first family, maybe there's something at the church that can help us." The collector sneered. "You waste your time." Elizabeth squared her shoulders, a new resolve in her eyes. "Maybe we are, but we're not giving up." The family bundled up and stepped out into the freezing night, the weight of the collector's gaze heavy on their backs as they left the house. The church was as eerie as it had looked in the photograph. Its tall spire pierced the night sky, and its broken stained glass windows reflected the moonlight in strange, fractured patterns. Michael pushed open the heavy wooden doors, which creaked loudly in protest. Inside, the air was cold and still, and the faint scent of decay lingered. "Where do we even start?" Emma whispered, her voice echoing in the vast, empty space. Elizabeth pointed toward the altar. There's something carved into the stone. Let's check it out. The family approached the altar, where an inscription had been etched into the stone. The curse binds the blood. Only the first can release the last. What does that mean? Emma asked. Michael frowned. The first family, if they're the ones who started this, then maybe their bloodline has to end it. Elizabeth glanced around. But how do we find them? If they've been gone all this time? She stopped, her eyes widening. The box. It belonged to them. Maybe there's something else inside. Back at the house, the family opened the box again, searching for any clue they might have missed. Beneath the photograph, Michael discovered a faded piece of paper, folded tightly. Unfolding it carefully, he found a family tree. At the bottom, a single name was circled in red. Abigail Patterson. Emma gasped. Patterson? That's our name. Are we related to them? Michael nodded grimly. It looks like it. This isn't just about the house. It's about our family. Elizabeth's voice was barely above a whisper. If the curse started with Abigail, then she has to be the key. But she's long dead, Emma said. How do we? The answer came from the collector, who appeared in the doorway, his figure casting a long shadow across the room. Summon her, he said simply. The collector guided them through the steps of an ancient ritual, though his motives remained unclear. Was he helping them or ensuring the curse remained intact? The family arranged candles in a circle and placed the box at the center. The collector handed Michael a knife. Blood binds the living and the dead, he intoned. Offer yours to summon hers. Michael hesitated, but Elizabeth placed a hand on his arm. We don't have a choice. Taking a deep breath, Michael made a small cut on his palm, letting a few drops of blood fall into the box. The air in the room grew heavy, and the candles flickered violently. A chilling wind swept through the house, carrying with it a faint voice. Who calls me? The figure of a woman appeared within the circle of candles. She was translucent, her face worn with age, but unmistakably similar to Elizabeth's. Abigail, Michael asked. The woman nodded. Why have you summoned me? Elizabeth stepped forward. We're your descendants. This curse, it's destroying us. Please tell us how to end it. Abigail's face twisted with sorrow. I brought this curse upon us. I was the first to open the box, driven by greed and desperation. The only way to end it is to destroy the box and all it contains. But the collector said, Emma began, but Abigail cut her off. The collector feeds on fear and pain. He will not tell you the truth. The collector growled, his form shifting and becoming more monstrous. You cannot destroy what binds you. The curse will remain. Abigail turned to Michael. Do it now, before it's too late. Michael grabbed the box and threw it into the fireplace. The flames roared to life, consuming the wood and parchment within. The collector let out an ear-splitting scream, his body writhing as if in agony. No, he bellowed, his form disintegrating into ash as the box burned away. The house shook violently, the walls groaning as the curse unraveled. Abigail's figure began to fade as well, her expression one of peace. Thank you, she said softly. The curse is lifted. You are free. With that, she disappeared, and the house grew still. The next morning, the Patterson family sat together in the living room, the first rays of sunlight streaming through the windows. Is it really over? Emma asked. Michael nodded, though his face was etched with exhaustion. It feels like it. Elizabeth smiled faintly. Maybe now we can finally have a normal Christmas. As they exchanged relieved glances, the grandfather clock chimed once, just once, and then fell silent forever. And so, the curse that had haunted the Patterson family for generations was finally broken. But somewhere in the ashes of the box, a faint whisper lingered, a reminder that some things are never truly gone. The end.